Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service. Today presenting formulas. This is going to be an extension of midpoints. So I wanted to continue that theme, and I'm so excited actually to present this material that it's something that I like to play with astrology. It's really interesting, especially if you're relatively new to the subject. This kind of material and just going in and using it in charts can really help you to, how do I put this? It can really help you gather more details in the work you're doing as astrologers. So before I begin, as always, I wanted to say thank you to all of the people who subscribe. Regardless of whether it's this YouTube channel or the website, I really appreciate you allowing me into your lives. I appreciate you helping me to get this channel to grow. It's just so exciting to me. It is actually a dream come true because I am a teacher. I've taught everything I do. And the ironic thing is the thing I've done the longest in life is astrology. And though I've been a teacher every now and then, I just feel like I really want to do something big in the way of teaching. So thank you all for allowing me to do that. So today's information, I always like to do my resources, will be based in another teacher of mine. Her name is Penelope Bertinelli. So if I'm saying it even correctly, Bertuzzi, I really I'm not very good at pronunciation. But in any case, Penny, lovely woman, was a teacher at, I go to a lot of, or did go to a lot of workshops. We, of course, don't have as many, but we're going to go back to this book, I believe, is in a conference in 2004. Nope, 1995 is when she printed it, but I'm thinking maybe the early 2000s is when I got it. And this one's from 1998. So, and this is my teacher, Martha Lang Westcott, although I have to be honest with you, they're all friends. We're all friends. And I've studied with both of these women. And ironically, Penny's been in classes that I've been in with Martha. So it's just a conglomerate of astrologers. In any event, what that astrology group uses a lot is dials. And so a lot of the information is based in cosmobiology, also known as Uranian astrology. And one of the things that I didn't talk about in the last video on midpoints, and I wanted to do it here, is that all of their work is based in the work of Ebertin, which is the man who wrote Rules for Planetary Pictures. So as you get into this work, this formula work, it's very Uranian, developed, I believe, in the earlier part of the 1900s, part of 20th century work. But what it is a whole book, and I even have it marked off because that's what I was taught to do by another teacher. And the Rules for Planetary Picture it's like the Bible of formulas. And here you'll see things like the moon plus the moon, and then minus the sun, the Aries, the sun. We're going to talk about all of that. And basically what it can also amount to is these formulas. If you've got two things together, okay, maybe you have Mars and moon, and you find out that the midpoint of Mars and moon equals something. That interpretation can be helpful, and you would find it using this. Because what he's doing is he's mathematically working with all of the points that we use. Apologize for the noise. I just put it on pause. There's still the never-ending construction that occurs out in front of the property. In any event, what I was discussing when I was so rudely interrupted was the rules for planetary pictures and how they themselves represent what these points mean. Okay, so just moving on from that, So I'm not using that book per se, but I really want you and need you to know that all the work we're doing is based in this work. Okay, that he came first and they followed. Okay, so I just want that, just get our little timetables correct. So we're going to be looking at what Martha refers to as, and again, I'm always going to be giving you an edited version because I'm not Martha, so I'm not going to look at things exactly the same way. She does a whole series for us, and she did at this particular event, of formulas that are sensitive points, okay? And I'm going to go over them today. The other thing, and I've been really debating about this, and I still might, we're just going to wait and see how time goes. But we're going to look at a fictitious person. I may pull up a transiting chart and just go from there so we could, find out about this person who doesn't exist. But let's just see how far we get before I'm so ambitious. I always do this when I'm teaching. I come up with more information than I have time. So I do want to say that what I'm going through in Penny's book is based in health. Once again, I'm going to be doing an edited version. So as I go through, I'm going to just kind of skim because the information applies to many things within that vein. And I think you'll understand when you see it. Okay, so let's jump and go look at our papers, our notes, and see what we have set up. What we should be seeing is my notes, okay? And I know it always goes to the end, and let's go back up to the beginning. And it's formulas used in astrology, and believe me when I tell you, they could write books on formulas because you can create a formula based on what it is you're looking for. You just have to have this really great vocabulary about, or a really ability to discern what each of these points can point to, or look, what do they encompass? What are they associated with? And one of the things that Martha did was she doubled up the personal points. Okay, so you take the midheaven and then and say that somebody has a midheaven of, let's use an Aries point of 22 30 Aries, then you would take 2230 and 2230 and you would add it together and you would come up with 45, which is an Aries point axis. I did that on purpose, okay? So whenever you use, and we could use any number of examples here, maybe we should let's go and pull up a chart and we'll create somebody. I don't like to use anybody's chart. We could be using some famous artist, musician. We could be using somebody in politics, but I really don't like to do that as much. I know it's something I have to get past if I'm going to teach because we do need to come up with examples. I don't feel as bad using somebody who's dead, so I might consider that in any event. Let's go jump and see what we've got here for an astrology chart. So this is a Jana's chart, and I'm just did a transiting chart. I didn't even pull up a full moon or anything like that. I wanted to keep it just math. And I'm going to use, and it's so interesting because it is still a very close to what we just used for our midheaven. The sun actually was that point. But let's start over. Let's take 2134 Taurus based in what we know. Okay. So, and this is where we could even pull up my little example here of, let's pull it up actually, which would be, what would I have labeled that? Let me go look for it. Okay, so I found the sheet so we can go back and forth, okay? So we're looking at 21 degrees of Taurus. So we're looking at approximately 51 51, and we'll go, oops, wrong one. We're looking at 51, so 34. And if we put 51, 34, 51, 34 together, okay, so here, let me grab my, I had it on the computer and then didn't. So let's grab a pen. Okay. So we're looking at this point right here, and we're going to double it. And it comes to in a 360 format. And again, you could do this in 90, but I'm keeping it at 360, 34. Now, what you would do is you would double it. Okay. So this is where the numbers start getting big, and then all you do is you just subtract 360. But if we double this, we're going to come up with 102.64. Okay, and which would bring it basically to 103.04. I think everyone saw how I did that. Okay, so now I'm going, this is midheaven, midheaven. Okay, this is our ego. And it's a sensitive point in the chart, okay, because this is the midheaven when it is added into itself. Kind of makes sense if you really think about it. So now I'm going to look, what is 103.04? And that is going to be my number. Make sure I have this right. 102, because this is 10, 2, okay, 5. Okay, so I want to make sure that I'm getting this correctly, because I'm known for messing this up. So the number we're taking with us is this. So we want to memorize that. So 103.04, we're going to go back in here and we're going to look right in here at Cancer is 103.04 would be 103 would be 13 degrees. See how I got that? 4 minutes, 13 degrees, 4 minutes of Cancer. Okay, that's what that sensitive point comes to. Now, the next process, which we would do, is we could take the sun out of that. We could subtract it, in other words, and we would be here creating our formulas, okay? But I'm only staying right now with what Martha was doing in the, this is when we were in Bethesda, Maryland, okay? So I guess this might have been 97 now that I think about it. I was really I had just found teachers in the 90s where I started to really connect with teachers. I had been an astrologer. I'd been studying. I'd actually been making even money at it, but I was not as learned as I was once I started really studying with teachers. I haven't done that for so long. It's actually something I really miss. But I do listen to people online, like you do. So when you get into Martha's work, what she tended to do with the formulas was she did everything based on the formulas. Okay, so I'm going back in her book right now. And the formulas are all about bringing out our sensitivity. So if this particular person with this 21 degree Taurus midheaven has a real personal sensitivity in the ego, because of course the ego is related to the midheaven, the real sensitivity would be in Cancer. So that's really interesting to me. So there is a Cancer sensitivity. And then you would do is you would go back to the chart. Okay. Sure, we will. We're going to go back to the chart that we were looking at. And we would say that this particular person has the sensitivity for the ego in the, it would be actually in the 11th house. And that's interesting. That's your friends, your connections. Wow. I think this would have worked. And that point, look, it's with Kronos. So it's in credibility. It's with authority figures. It might be improving oneself within a group, or just, are we following what I just did? Okay, let's do another one. Again, our fictitious individual. Okay. The ascendant has nothing on it. Well, we didn't put the asteroids in yet, but the ascendant, and by the way, what you'd want to do is layer this, then get those points. We already know it was very close to Kronos at 13.4, and that's 12.2. That's like it's a degree, degree in 2 minutes. I would call that 2 minutes out. That's what I would say. But it still could be a factor. What you would do then is keep that point, write it down, go in there, layer it up, put in all of your asteroids. That would take care of that. So just make sure I'm out of that. Let's go in and let's take the asteroids. And I don't work with all of the asteroids, but actually, I work with 90% of them, if not a little higher than that. There's some that I don't. I work with different ones. And this happens when you go into different softwares. People work with different asteroids. I might work with thousands, which is obviously bigger than this list. But in my thousands, several of these are not there. Okay. So I've decided to select all. We're going to throw them in. And, oh, that's right. I have to figure out how to make the fonts bigger. Well, then what you would do is you'd go back over here. We got at 13.4, we actually have an asteroid. Oh, I know it's almost impossible to see, but Juno is there. It would actually be Demeter, which means it's the nurturing concept. It's the fairness. Okay. Wow, this is just great stuff. I'm gonna take that off. Unfortunately, I have to do some work on this program, and I keep putting it off. But you can usually make all of those things different when you go in and work on them. So here in this chart, you have you don't know it, but there's an asteroid right here. Let me see if I can select it. Okay, let me just see if I can, and I believe it was her. So let me see if we can get her in there. I don't see her. Let me see if I can try that again. I probably didn't I didn't finish, which is usually my problem. Oh, it didn't come up. So again, I better do my homework, my due diligence. We can look at it on SolarFire. SolarFire might have a slightly different chart, yes, because I did it at a different time. So it isn't going to be able to tell us much. But if I look for Demeter, I apologize again for the noise. If I look for Demeter, I should just go to see if there it is, 13:05. It's only a minute different. So I didn't do them yet because today is still today. But you can see that 13.5. That's incredible. That would definitely be a creation of a formula that gives you more depth about this particular individual and their sensitivity. Okay? That's awesome. Let's go back to Janet's where it's less complicated. Okay. So here, let's look at something else. We'll look at the ascendant. So at 2732, at 2732, we're coming to, we have to go back to Leo. So this is what I mean by keep those things handy. I'm showing you how to do it. So at 27, it's going to be 147. Okay, so we want to remember that number as we go back. Okay, we're going back, and so we're really at 147.32. So now I'm going to get my pen out again, and we're going to put in 140 because that's the number it comes to, 7.32. Now think about all the things that we know about the ascendant. It's our 12th house. It's our coping mechanisms, our defense mechanisms. It's kind of our boundary, if you will. So when you think of this point, there's a lot that comes with it that is our ability to be, in some respects, adaptable via our environment. This is the environment, whether it's what you look like or where you live. So now we're looking at a 64 for the, so we're, dealing with the bigger numbers again, which is fine because it's good to see how this works. 9. Okay, so we still didn't have to subtract the 360, but we're getting there. Okay, so the 294.64 will then equate to 295. This is the number we want to take with us. 295.04. There we are with our 04 again. Wow, that should be 38. Okay, I just realized my mistake. That should be an 8. It should have been an 8. So, but still, the 5, they all still work, okay? The Chronos now is a few more minutes out, but because that was 2, and now we're at 8. And so, yeah, I blew that one. So I'm not, when I do these things, I should probably do them 3 or 4 times before I do them. So the number we're taking with us is this. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to pick up my numbers again. Now, again, 2, our number was 2, here we go, 294, and this is why I get so screwed up. 294, and then I made it 295, and then it was, I should write this stuff down, and 4 seconds. 295. So look at this. 295 is actually in Capricorn. So our ascendant in Leo leads us to having a soft spot, and we're sensitive in our, and really, let's talk about this for a second because I really want to point this out. So we're looking, let me just get a final on this. We're looking at 25 degrees, 4 minutes of Capricorn. So way in Capricorn, very, very deep in Capricorn. And we started off in Leo. So let's look at that. Let's go back to the Janus. And at 27 degrees of Leo, 32. Let's talk about that for 2 seconds. The environment of Leo and what we already know. They're charming. They're outgoing. They like being the center of attention. What could be a weakness for a Leo might be Capricorn. The structure, the credibility, the answering to the boss, so to speak. So think of it as a sensitivity. These are sensitive points. They are sensitive. They are our sensitivities. Okay. And our coping mechanisms might have to kick in 3 times more when the Leo is faced with the authority figure, the boss. It's just so wonderful. Now, what else you could do is look at what else may have fallen at this point of Capricorn. So I go back into Capricorn, and Pluto is a little far away, but I think we can still say there's a play there, that this person might transform through these experiences, and I can see that as well. So that's why I'm going to let that go. I do believe that you could go out about a degree or so. And in this particular case, again, you're out some minutes. So that weakens the energy. It makes it not as strong. But once again, you could go back in, and I'm actually going to use this one because it's the same day. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to look to see what else is showing up at that point of Capricorn. And if there's anything else that we could pick up besides Pluto. And on the other side of that, we do have the asteroid of enabling, the asteroid of being of service. And maybe this particular person, the way they would cope or adapt to a boss being present in the environment, or that they have to entertain the boss, is that they might be transform into this super duper professional, even if they're somebody who walks around and cracks jokes. And they would be of, how can I serve you? What can I do for you? Isn't that incredible? And that was just one aspect of what we're looking at today. So you would go through and you could do the same for the sun, the moon, the nodes. They all will give you another picture, if you will, of maybe where you're really sensitive. And if you're really sensitive there, what are the coping mechanisms as it is in the case of the ascendant? In the case of the midheaven, how is the ego affected? With the sun, how is the drive, the ambition, the expectation altered by those sensitive points? They're very worth looking at. It doesn't mean that every point, like we had in this chart, every point doesn't always get close to other things. That doesn't always happen. I'm just really happy that it happened today. So let's move to the next part of what I wanted to go through. So I'm just going to come down, get rid of all this. I don't need this one, but I do need this one. Okay, so doubling up those very important points, those personal points, can teach you the sensitivities of those points. This is a really awesome way to do astrology, guys. I have definitely, as you can tell, dabbled in this. I am very excited about it, but I do have to write everything down because going from one place to another, I lose track of what I'm working with mathematically. Okay, so the sums, these are called creating sums. These are the sums. They are not a list of midpoints. It's like another list of midpoints, but these are now sums. They're not midpoints. They're called sums. I hope everybody follows that. You don't break these in two. You'd only go back to the same one. These are referred to as sums. So those people who study Uranian, and I know you're out there because I've heard from somebody who did, and the Uranian style, this is a very popular method and it works. It's wonderful. It is absolutely wonderful. I can't say enough about it. So as I go on, and I love this, this is, again, Martha pointed this out in hers. These formulas are for personal awareness. So that comes from Martha Lang Westcott and her material, and it really wonderful information. There are planetary combinations. Now I'm getting into what a real formula is. Well, and these are for personal awareness as well, but so are the sums. The planetary combinations are also things that teach us about not necessarily when something will happen, although it could, but again, it's that awareness of self. It's how we respond often to these, and that's what we're going to go through, these scenarios. In some cases, planets, asteroids, or trans-Neptunians would fall here, and that would give you more insight, more detail. So I'm just giving a couple of different ones. Planetary combinations will spell out things like divorces, children, both male and female, infirmities, death of mother and father, etc. They are super duper in really kind of getting to the nitty gritty of the chart. And a couple of things here that are really worth looking at, and we could do a couple of these with our fictitious person. The depression, but look what's applied here, and this is where it gets really educational. The ascendant, which is the coping mechanism and the surroundings, plus haze, deterioration, dirt, the details, the basically the dirt of the matter, minus Mars, action. But do you see how it applies? Of course it's depression. It's the reaction of the ascendant plus the haze, that's a sum, minus the Mars creates now a picture. And by the way, we do this in axis work all the time, because when something falls in an axis, it creates a mathematical configuration. Oh, I hope that that met home with a lot of you. So that when you're looking at the ascendant and you're looking at the surroundings and you see that that ascendant has some kind of aspect, or is there's let's gather up the numbers. Okay, that's another, there's so many different ways of doing this. You can do it on a dial and not use as many numbers, just using your eye. But we're going to do the math. It's just too simple. Okay, let's look at depression. And we'll look at our fictitious individual. And I am actually going to grab a notepad so that I will remember the numbers as I go from place to place. And this is the best way to work, because you are going to go from one kind of software to another kind of software. And I'm going to need my other paper up again so that we can do this. Now, first of all, we can start, because we knew that we had that 27 degree Leo. We came up with a number of 147. So we can start there. Okay, 100, I think it was 34. And so we can start there because we actually know that number. And we don't double it this time. This time we're going to stick with just a plain old formula. But I got to go back in the chart, and I have to go back and I have to look for Hades, which is the reason why I left them up here, which is 8 degrees. So we have 8 degrees of Cancer, 57 minutes. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, of course, let's get the other one while we're here, just to have everything. So the last one was Mars. And Mars is at 24/7 Gemini. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I go back to my paper. Okay. And I'm going to look them up. So 8 degrees of Cancer would be 9857. And 24 degrees of Gemini would be, 8407. So we have 3 numbers. And hopefully you saw how I got those numbers off of this paper. Okay, just reiterating again for those of you who maybe feel like you're playing catch up. Leo is down here, and we were dealing with a 27 degree, 27. Let's get the minutes. I've seen they're 32. Okay, 2732 was the number we're dealing with. Okay, so 2732 equates to 147, because you would add it right on that Leo, 32 minutes. We have an 8 degree of Cancer. So we would put 8 degrees and 57 minutes on Cancer, because it starts at 90. Then we go to Gemini, and fortunately they're all so easy to find, and we have 84 degrees because we started with a 24 degrees. So we have to add 24 degrees onto 60. And hopefully that math was more than obvious. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some adding and subtracting. And I'm going to do it on our notes. Okay? Because I want to do it right near depression. So those of you who want to do screenshots or you want to take a note of this, you can. So I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to do a little math. And let's hope my math works out. I'm not, I was always so good in math, but I am definitely a calculator fool. So if I'm going to take 132 and I'm going to add to it 9857. Okay. Not the best. Now, when I add them together, I come to 89. This is 15, so I carry the 1, then it's 14, and I carry the 1, and it comes to 245. Okay, so now I have 245.89 or 246 Although for this, we could really leave it either way, and I'm going to leave it. But I do want to note that, you know, it's not a bad habit to always take it back to within that 60 minutes. Okay? So now I'm going to subtract. That's why I don't need to worry. I can go back to this first number. And I'm going to subtract from the first number 8407. Okay? So as I subtract now, I'm going to come up with 82, which is why it's okay to do that. And then from here, it's a 1. 14 makes that a 6. And now we have a 161.82 or 162.22. So does everyone see how I got that? I hope so. Okay? So now that is Mars that I subtracted. So just so that we know what we're working with. This is Mars. Okay? This is Hades. All right? And this is our ascendant. Okay? Which there is no real glyph for, and my writing is not good with the mouse, but gives you an idea. So now our depression point, or our sensitive point for depressions, or the way we handle depressions, when we might be more prone to depressions, this individual would come to, so go back to my other paper. Let me write this down because I don't want to forget. I really can't stress enough that going back and forth between screens, you really want to make note. So I'm going to now look, well, first I'm going to go back to this paper because I want to do this all in order. And I want to look at what 162.22 is. Well, it would be in here. It would be Virgo. Wow, 22.22, who knew? Okay, well, because of 150, just make sure I got it right. No, it isn't, it's 12. 12 degrees 22, I just wanted it to be 22.22. It's actually 12 degrees because you would subtract and it comes to 12. So we're talking about 12 degrees of Virgo, 22 minutes. All right. Now, what I want to do is I want to go back to the chart and I'm going to go look at what is going on at that point, if anything. Okay. And honestly, the closest thing we have is the part of fortune, and it's 3 degrees away, which I would say is not. However, it might be worth looking at the fact that that point of depression falls in the first house. And the first house is the house of I am, which means that when this person is triggered, it would affect the first house. It would affect them, which is, again, pretty telling. It also is indicating that it might be a situation where they then either they might keep to themselves, or they could even be, depending on what asteroids fall there, they could even have issues within themselves. So let's go look at that. So the sensitivity point for that depression is in here. It also means that from that point, at that point, 12 degrees 22, that'd be a day where you also might want to be alert to maybe what's going on. There could be a greater sensitivity. So let me go to solar fire just because I haven't fixed my asteroids here. And we're going to go look at 12 degrees of Virgo. And remember, there wasn't a whole lot there. Now here we have right outside of it is somebody questioning things. So this person might question depression. Why am I depressed? You know, it's interesting because when I see this kind of lineup, this is when I would question the person. And this is just my many years of astrology at work at play here. But the next place I'd look probably would be Vulcan. And the reason why is because to have this as a sensitive point, to have this be a depression point, also points to, for me, what I call burnout. depression, which is those people that burn the candle at both ends and then they get depressed, but they're really not depressed. They're actually exhausted. And that's how their body, their physical I am body responds. And that would equate to not only this questioning of it, but also decisions that are made as a result of it, because that is a deciding factor, that CO point there. And it also isn't very far away from strategy or surprises. And remember that midpoints do apply to these points. So now it gets really complicated, because say that somebody's come to you and they're very depressed, or you're going through something, you're really depressed. This is a great exercise in really taking a deep dive into what is causing that depression. And is it the kind of depression that comes from woe is me, or is it whoa, I'm burned out? Okay, it's this is where you'd find that. Now you could do this. I'm going to go back to you can do this with all of these points. And I only listed some. You have to understand there are books of these. You can make these up for yourself once you become very accustomed to that lingo of what these points stand for. If somebody's having a crisis in their career, they might want to start looking at midheaven formulas, because I think that they're going to get a really good idea of if they're headed in a bad place or not. The with regards to their ego, their expectations, their drive when it comes to their professional outward life, their social standing, if you will. There is so much here, because emotional grief also comes under midheaven. And so one of the things that I do on the sly, and I like to do every now and then, I noticed that Penny does it in her book, Martha does it all the time too, where they make associations, okay, that would help you then be able to set up formulas. If you are looking at mental disturbances, a lot of times whenever there's disillusion, mental issues, illnesses in general, any points where a person could be deceptive, you might want to like check out Neptune node for connections with your people, in terms of people being able to understand you, or are they taking advantage of you, how much compassion from your connections. But you understand how that works, and then you can begin to do what I've done. And I just took these out of the book, but these are things like female children, male children, death of mother, addictions. Notice the South Node here. Addictions are heavily, heavily related to the Black Moon and to the South Node. And so you here again could be working with some formulas that would give you, again, greater insight. The really cool part about this is that when you start doing this kind of work, you really do gain a lot more information, and now you have to believe it. Second part of being an astrologer is not just being able to read that chart, but trusting that that chart is right. And that's all of this. I like that the reason I put separation in here is because, again, we're talking ascendant, we're talking environment, coping mechanisms, but I love this. Cusp of the 7th house. That's what this means. Okay? Cusp of the 7th house is your partner, your partnerships. And that is critical in this kind of equation. And then to see how the separation, this I believe was Penny's book, and she uses Uranus. You could use Saturn for separations as well. So again, it would depend on, in this case, the separation would be a friend, then it would be Uranus. I would think of something closer, maybe Saturn. But Saturn can also be connections. So you have to be careful how you set these up. Now, one of the things that I did as I went through all of them, and by the way, the book that I was working with and all of this material does involve the trans-Neptunians. Now, I also, through Martha, I have learned how to incorporate the asteroids, which is why we're doing it. But realize that now at this point in astrology, as we become into the 20th century, they are in this technique working on a regular basis with the trans-Neptunians, also known as fictitious planets, because they're actually points in space. But these are all points in space and they still work. Bear that in mind. Now, I just wanted to go through, because I know I'm getting long again, the midheaven formulas. I want to go through this. State refer to consciousness. They relate to state of mind and the ego. Okay, for this point to work, it has to be accurate with regards to the timing. There has to be a good time to work with, or it won't work. The same thing can be said for the formula, that an accurate birth time is definitely necessary in this situation. And, you know, the ascendant is your surroundings. And in this particular book, she was taking each of these points and looking at them as they relate to health. She and Martha work together. Martha is the queen of medical asteroids and medical astrology related to asteroids, and has done phenomenal work there. And Penny works through these formulas where she has assigned, and it's very, how do I put this? It's very common sense related to how this all relates to our health. The Aries point, I kind of edited that again. It's something well worth looking into. If you do have, you know, an interest in that area, let me know. I do consider, I will consider doing some medical, what I've learned. I've actually done some real cases too with regards to medical astrology, and I will do some videos on those. But as we get to that, it's really important to know this. So I'm trying to keep it so that we're learning in a sequential way. The Aries point is the public or the world, and it describes the influence in the world and the influence of the world on our health, as it were, in this book. The sun represents the body and its vitality. Well, that's true regardless. The sun is always our body. When we get to medical astrology, I am going to talk about how if you don't have an accurate time for a chart, you could use the sun and the axis of the sun to really look at a person's medical history, if you will. And it is incredibly accurate, and it really works. And I do it even if I have a good time, but it's really nice to have a good time because you can look back on that ascendant and that midheaven if the time is accurate. Now, for our purposes, when you're working with these, you would just, what I would say is you could still do all those personal sums that we had done earlier. Just skip midheaven and ascendant if you don't have it. You could still learn about somebody and only know the day they were born. You could take that sun degree and add it and know a lot about them. That moon degree, again, getting closer in time because the moon changes rather quickly as well. It's only there for a day or two. So it's kind of hard to get an accurate view of that without a time. But without a time, we do amazing work with the sun and the sun axis, or the axis of the sun, however you want to look at it. So the moon represents all things that are of the feminine principle. So it's the intangibles, what you can't see. It relates to emotional stuff because it's all about I feel. Domestic situations are in the domain of the moon, and the women. So it's very female, whereas the sun can do that, but so can Mars in a woman's chart, whereas in the men's chart would be Venus and the moon, in particular the moon. The node represents the bondings that we form. It's the interactions, the boundaries, the connections, the unions in general are all node related. But when you consider, and I talk about this all the time, if you're working with the north node, you got to look at the south node. But when we did that formula for addictions, it didn't look at the north node. It looked at the south node. Just know that the north node is something you might want to consider in that situation because the north node is the arrow that points the way out. Okay? The Mercury is the attitude and this thinking process, and I actually put one in there that I put some examples in here where we're not using the ascendant midheaven, where we're actually using some formulas. that relate back to these things. Like if you want to look at your physical agility, then you want to look at Mercury, and the sun. Why? Because Mercury is all about motion. All right. And it's Mercury because that's where all the flexibility is. And then sun being the body. If you wanted to do it for the mind, it would be a different kind of combination. Or you wouldn't use the sun. We could put it that way too. So Mercury plus Mercury minus the sun would give you some knowledge about a physical ability. I think a little bit about the quickness of the mind as well, but I think that really, according to what I was reading, it's physical ability. Venus relates to the beauty, the hair, the skin. Wow. And I'm not sure what this was. So I'm going to take it out. Okay. And basically the inner emotional. So just think of all those things that, attract us, like beauty and the skin, when you look at things like that, the hair. But it's also speaking about our emotional psychology when it comes to harmony and beauty. Okay. And here's one, sterility. I just thought that was interesting because, I wanted to grab something that I thought was pretty interesting. And there's a lot. Again, books are written on this stuff. So there's a tremendous amount of examples of Venus formulas. But I decided to use sterility because I need to talk about some things. Remember, we talked about Neptune as illnesses, deceptions, being misled, chaos. Okay. And Zeus is fire. My example, I think it was the last video where I said we used to make up words and, a Zeus Cirrus was a cigarette, or you could even say Zeus Mercury because it's a fire. Well, here it's a fire that relates to Venus, which also relates to hormones and things related to sex. And not sex in the Mars sex, that's a whole other thing, but sex as it relates to the reproduction. Let's do it that way. That makes more sense. So in reproduction, there's a fire that's caused, an illness, so to speak. The fire, Zeus, it's sterility. And it's interesting because Zeus with Neptune would be bad because Zeus is also the seed. So that's a misconception, a seed that doesn't take root, so to speak. And it equals sterility. And that is one of the formulas. Another is Mars is direct action. And here you're related to, and it's a decisive energy. It governs the muscles of the body as well as the energy level. It's about the willpower, will of Mars. Mars is another one I've left an example for. And I used Mars plus Uranus because Uranus is sudden and it's eruptive and revolutionary. And Mars can be very aggressive, assertive, brash, all those things. And minus the midheaven, the sense of professionalism. Well, there could be a tendency to be violent at this point. And you want to see what's there, if anything. That's the sensitivity to violence, to be violent, the interaction of the creation of violence. Saturn is also in here, and I'm just going to kind of breeze through these. These are the further out. I didn't leave as much of an example. However, I do want to point out that, and again, Saturn is one of those things where it is about separations, but it's also about commitments. Uranus is sudden separation. Saturn might be more of not as quick, unless it's coming with Saturn. But I don't want to do political. There's a whole chapter, a little section here on political stuff, and we could get into it. I did mention some of that in my last video. But if you wanted to get in there and be a political astrologer, surely there is a lot of information on it. Now, what I'm looking for here is, I want to go back to the original. Okay. So she has like Saturn, Uranus's operations, overstrain, sudden physical separations. So, which is also a Saturn, Uranus. So when we talk about anything that is, although chronic disease or things that last a long time would be related to Saturn. as well as, like I said, those separations, unless it comes with Uranus, they usually take a minute too. Saturn is something that occurs more or less over time. It's like getting older. So that's a very Saturn thing. Aging is very Saturn because of the lack of moisture in the body. The bones are not as good. Flexibility seems to go away. And so Saturn is associated with those kinds of things. And so those kinds of things are also like stage fright, which is another one. Sterilization. That's what I was actually looking at. So here we were looking at sterility, but there's another one called sterilization, which is Saturn plus Zeus minus Mars. Does it sound familiar? Yeah. The difference is Saturn and Mars are replacing Venus and Neptune. So you see how that works. Whereas wounds and accidents, you see a lot of Uranus. Okay, so I really wanted to reiterate the difference between what happens in Uranus and what happens in Saturn. Saturn here is associated with the skeleton. As I said, it is also about the aging process. Uranus is a timekeeper, but not in the sense of Saturn, where Saturn is about aging and being linear, but no, Uranus is more about rhythm. It's also sudden action, but it's a rhythm. Okay. It's related to things that in health that are related to rhythm, but it's also our friends. It's also our sense of freedom. Okay. It's like, oh, I can't take this anymore. I can't do it. Usually when that happens, it's Uranus. It's an eruption. Okay. Revolution. Okay. That's Uranus. Neptune is the grand illusion, chaos and confusion. And it is usually associated with infections and illness in general. Okay. But if you have it show up in any of your pictures, and it's probably not a good time to go to a doctor, because if Neptune's in the picture, you might not get a good answer because it's Neptune. And it's not against the doctor. It's Neptune. There's even this thing about illnesses that are hard to diagnose. Neptune's in that picture. Pluto is about transformation and regeneration. It can relate to the process of recovery. So when you're looking at illnesses, you want to know when you're going to recover. Oftentimes it's a Pluto-Jupiter type of configuration. There is, because Pluto will let you know about, when you're recovering. The other thing that I like to talk about with Pluto is, because it's transformational, it's also related to not just the recovery time, but like if you have stomach issues, it would be a Hades Pluto. And that's where this stuff starts getting really, really cool, because it's a digestive or an elimination system issue. That is Pluto. Pluto's also debts. So if you're looking about things, because you don't have control over it, and that's how that stuff works. So Pluto is pretty big. It's pretty big in whether you're doing health work or if we're just doing plain old work. It may have been downgraded to a planetoid, but to an astrologer, it's still a really important planet. The midpoint for travel is Mercury, Saturn. So now you also can get into midpoints and how they play out when you're working with formulas. That equates to Cupido. And then that would mean you're traveling with a family member. And where she's taking these examples, which is where we're going to end up this video, is that she actually took them from horary charts. She was doing horary work, and she could apply the formulas to the work she was doing and was able to come up with. For example, the question was about travel. So Mercury and Saturn are already going to be focal points. But what she did was she looked at the midpoint, subtracted Jupiter because it's the trip. And the Saturn's a separation, Mercury is a journey. all of this is a trip, and it equaled Cupido, which means that whatever this person was, he wasn't going alone. He was going with a family member, and he was going with his wife. So these formulas can give just greater detail all the way around when you're doing horary. So you would be able to look at these things. Now remember that traditional horary wasn't and won't use trans-Neptunians, but here in this book, she does a whole chapter on how she's applying these new points, if you will, to horary. So at the beginning of that 1900s, the 20th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, they actually were doing more with their horary. They had already kind of stepped it up, if you will. I think the difference is whether or not you are a Uranian astrologer, because there are still astrologers today that won't touch the trans-Neptunians. It's just not a part of their work. I like to point out that if you're in a business where you have customers, you want to look at the midpoint of the ascendant and Apollon. The ascendant, because of the surroundings, is because of who you are, your own personal, and Apollon is business. So it's your ability to partake in business. It's also more than one, but it's business. It's expansion on steroids. It's Jupiter on steroids. Many of the trans-Neptunians, and I've done work on them. I don't know that I've done videos, but I have definitely done articles, and maybe it's something I should consider, on the trans-Neptunians. There are 8 of them. And they do represent a lot of different things, but they're often associated with planets. Like Apollon is Jupiter, but with steroids. Cupido is oftentimes associated with Venus, again, on steroids. So you're looking at these associations, if you will, and it helps you to know more about them. Saturn on steroids could be a Chronos. You see what I mean? And you just kind of go on like that, and I think it helps you to learn them even better. There's more dynamics there. Mars on steroids might be Vulcan. Vulcan. And so on and so forth. So it's just a lot of different ways to look at astrology. So I'm going to leave it there because I'm trying not to talk. I'm bad at that. But anyway, let me come on back here. So I want to thank you. It's gone a little longer than I wanted, but I really hope that you're gaining something through these videos that are literally recapping old classical material and just putting it out there, re-representing it, if you will, and allowing a new generation of astrologers to partake. I, as always, want to wish you only happy readings. And in this day and age, I want to also say to you, take care. But thank you for sticking it out through the video and helping me build the channel.